Hi everyone, this is chapter 3 about decimal numbers. We're going to look at the words that mean decimal numbers or the decimal numbers in the words. We're going to go back and forth with this. Notice that we have a place value chart and you need to know the place values that are to the right of the decimal. To the left of the decimal are the ones, and then when we go right of the decimal we're at the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and 10,000ths. Notice the THS on the end of those. That's important because that's telling us that we're after the decimal place. All right, we're going to write these first two in words. And so if you take a look at number 1, that is, normally we would say it 8.7, but that's not really how you say that. Actually, we'd say 8 and 7/10, because the 7 is in the tenths place, the 8 is in the ones place, so 8 and 7/10. On the second number, it's 14.091, but we actually say that 14 and 91, we put a dash there for 91 thousandths. Okay, so for the next three, numbers 3, 4, and 5, we're going to write these as decimal numbers. We have 40 and 6/10, so that's 40, and then the decimal point, the 6 is in the tenths place. So that's 40 and 6/10. We say and for the decimal. On number 4, 3 and 205 thousandths. Now you got to think about that for a minute. 3 and 205 thousandths. That means the 5 has to be in the thousandths place. Sometimes that's helpful to think about. So 3 and 205 thousandths. So that puts the 5 in the thousandths place, and there's your number. And then the last one is 5 hundredths. So the 5 has to be in the hundredths place, which is 2 places to the right of the decimal. And then when you look at that, right, 5 hundredths. So that's just a little practice with the place values, really. Understanding that is important for different things that we do, including rounding. All right, let's take a look at this application problem. It's applications of addition and subtraction. So find the total cost of the materials for a certain masonry job if sand costs $16.63, mortar mix is $99.80, and brick are $1,476.28. Well, we're finding a total, and that means we're going to add these up. So we have $16.63 plus $99.80 plus $1,476.28. So we just add them together. Use your calculator. It is a dollar amount, so $1,592.71, and that's our total. All right, let's look at the next one. Okay, so now we're going to practice some rounding, and I believe I mentioned this on other videos, but rounding is really important. Getting it correct is important. And so you really have to know your place values, but we're going to use the same place values a lot. So, you should be familiar with those. All right, let's take a look at this. So on the first one, we're rounding this number. It's 0.5728. That's 5,728 10,000ths if we were going to say it correctly. But to the nearest tenth means I'm going to this place value right to the right of the decimal place. I'm going to point that arrow there to tell me what to do with the 5. Well, in this case, we're going to add 1 to it because 7 is 5 or more, right? So that's going to be 0.6. And now the next one says to 3 decimal places. So that means 3 places after the decimal. We would put our line 3 places after, point at the next number, and then that's going to be 117.625. All right. Next, to a whole number. So whole numbers to the ones place, and that means that we're going to round it basically to the left of the decimal. So the ones place is here. That makes it that'll make it a whole number. This number tells us what to do with the 2, and we're going to add 1 to it. So that's 1463. Next, to the nearest hundredth, which is the 8 to the right of the decimal. There's a 2 after that, and that means that we're just going to drop those numbers. Now, when we work with whole numbers, we put zeros in place of whatever we're dropping, but when we work with decimal numbers, we don't do that. So this is going to be 19.48, and you don't put any zeros following that. We only do that if we're rounding numbers to the left of the decimal, right? Or we're rounding to the tens or the hundreds or something like that. All right, number 11. We're rounding this one to 2 decimal places, which would be 2 places after the decimal. We look at that third number to tell us what to do with that 2, and that's 56.83. And then finally this last one. Now I want you to think about this. It's to the nearest 10th. So to the nearest 10th would be the 9 that's to the right of the decimal. The 4 is going to tell us what we do with that 9. And so that just means we're going to drop everything to the right of the digit I underlined. So this is 9,999 and 9/10. All right, so now that is rounded to the 10th place. All right. So next, we have order of operations with some decimal numbers. So the rules for order of operations are the same. We're going to use the same rules. So on number 13, we're going to divide before we subtract, and we just use our calculator to calculate those numbers. So on this one, we'll have 15.8. We're going to do this part first, the division, minus 5.5. or 5 5/10, if I say it correctly. So that was 4.4 divided by 0.8. And then we subtract, and that is 10.3. All right, and then next on number 14, we have some we have some parentheses, multiplication and division. Okay, so when it's a division bar like this or a fraction bar, we have to find the number on top first in the numerator, and then we will divide by the 20. Okay, so it's 32.2 minus 14.6, which is 17.6, and then we're going to multiply that by 3.5. And then, of course, we're going to go ahead and write that over the 20. You don't want to drop that because you might forget about it. And then 17.6 times 3.5 is 61.6. And we're dividing that by 20. And that's our last step, is to actually divide 61.6 by 20. Remember, a fraction bar also means division. So that's 3.08. All right, and we are finished with that problem. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is an application problem for multiplication and division. So I want you to just take a moment to read through the problem. So we're going to calculate the torque at the rear wheels of an automobile, we multiply the torque of the engine by the drive ratio. If the engine torque is 305 foot-pounds and the drive ratio is 8.68 to 1, and we don't have to do anything with that to 1, that's just a ratio. Find the torque at the rear wheels, round to the nearest 10. Be careful there, because sometimes once you start knowing about tenths, you get tens and tenths mixed up. And so we take the torque of the engine times the drive ratio. So that's 305 times 8.68. And that will be 2,647.4. And then we're going to round that to the nearest 10. Right? And here's our tens place. That 7 tells me that I'm going to add one to the 4. So 2,650. And we've got it rounded. We also need to label it, and that is in foot-pounds. All right, and we're finished with that one. Okay, so now we're going to talk about decimal fractions. So this says to calculate in decimal form, round to agree with the number of decimal digits in the decimal number. So that's the given decimal number. So on the first one, that means we would round to 3 places after the decimal, and we would change 16 3/4 to 16.75. Remember, I find the 7.75 by taking 3 divided by 4. I'm going to subtract 0.584. Oh gosh, 5.842. That's what I'm subtracting. Geez. And that equals 10.908. I think that comes out like that exactly. So we didn't actually have to round it at all. On the second one, we're going to round to 2 places after, because that's how this decimal number is in the first place. So it's 1.17 divided by 1 point. If we take 3 divided by 32, we get 0.09375. So that's the part that's going to follow our decimal point. All right, so when we divide those, we get 1.06971. Now, on this one, we are rounding to the hundredths place, 2 places after the decimal. So that's going to be 1.07. So we've got that rounded then. We might have time to finish this one. We're going to fit a 45-degree connection. To fit a 45-degree connection, a plumber can approximate the diagonal length by multiplying the offset length by 1.414. Find the diagonal length of a 45-degree fitting if the offset length is 13 11/16 of an inch. Express the answer as a fraction to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so that can get a little bit tricky on that. And so we will have to multiply. So we multiply the diagonal length or the offset length by 1.414. All right, so I paused that for a moment, and I wrote this out. So when we multiply this, we get 19.354125. Now it tells us to express the answer as a fraction to the nearest 1/16. If we look at the chart over here, and we look at the different numbers on this, 5/16 is 0.3125. This would be 6/16, so our number's right in between those two. And that means that 6/16 would actually be the closest, which would be 3/8, because remember it was 0.35, which is a little closer to 0.375 than it is to 0.312. 0.25. And that's always a little bit tricky, so we're going to say 19 3/8, and this was going to be in inches. Now remember 3/8 is the same as 6/16. All right, so I'm going to stop this video here and I'll pick up this lesson on the next video.